We're jumping into the Arc 5 era with an archetype that definitely has stories to tell. We're taking a look at the Gladiator Beast archetype used by the Battle Beast in Arc 5. And yeah, this is actually the earliest meta-relevant archetype in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah, the very first, I believe. It was an archetype that was based around contact fusion with, like, shuffling your monsters into the deck in order to summon fusion monsters, and then defusing them later at the end of the battle phase, or maybe even earlier than that, in order to get some of those monsters' effects off the second time, or to summon new monsters which can splash some other new effects on the board at the time. But yeah, it was actually a very interesting archetype, and like I said, a very meta-relevant archetype. But through the course of time, it basically became outdated little by little, until they were revitalized in the new Link Reigns packs, and most recently in the Chaos Impact. So yeah, let's take a look how these guys function with their old and new support nowadays, starting with the level 2 Test Ape. Yeah, this is the one where everything starts from. Anyway, when it is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one level 4 or lower Gladiator Beast monster from your deck. Yeah, it served its purpose before there were any better options, but nowadays it doesn't really support the archetype that much, since it's not searchable. And yeah, an archetypal Mystic Tomato isn't something that will push them back into relevance. A bit better is Test Tiger. If you control a face-up Gladiator Beast monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You contribute this card to target one face-up Gladiator Beast you control, shuffle the target into the deck, then special summon one Gladiator Beast from your deck, and treat it if it was special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster. So yeah, now this monster actually gives us a glimpse of what the archetype is actually based on. And yeah, it has a neat special summoning condition which provides free material. Basically, it's a bit of a harsh cause that this thing needs to tribute itself in order to trigger that effect. But hey, it's an alright card, not much else to say. You usually run one or two of these because it has a pretty neat summoning condition, and it can help out in a pinch when you need it to switch between your Gladiator Beasts. So yeah. Alright, let's go on to the actual Gladiator Beast, starting off with one of their newer support cards, Gladiator Beast SAGITTARI. If this card is special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast card, a monster, sorry, you can discard one Gladiator Beast card, draw 2 cards. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can shuffle it into the deck and special summon one Gladiator Beast monster from your deck, except SAGITTARI. The second effect is basically one of the staple effects of most of the Gladiator Beast monster, and as for this thing, it's actually a pretty neat effect, no question about it. You can basically ditch Gladiator Beast you would like to have in your graveyard into the graveyard in order to get a nice +2, which is always a nice thing in my book, and yeah. It's basically a very nice card, and it's most definitely a 3-off in in modern Gladiator Beast decks. And next up we have Gladiator Beast TORAXER. If this card was special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster at the end of any battle phase this card attacked or was attacked, you can return it to the deck to draw 1 card. Yeah, this is a prototype SAGITTARI, and back earlier this was a below average draw option, but it wasn't amounting to much, so yeah. Not much else to say here, then it's really outdated, don't run it. Next up we have Gladiator Beast RETIRI, another level 3, and this one has this effect. When this card is special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster, you can remove from play 1 card in your opponent's graveyard. At the end of the battle phase, if this card attacked or was attacked, you can return it to the deck and special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck, except Gladiator Beast RETIRI. I mean, disrupting graveyard setup is nothing to scoff at, but there's plenty of better options and engines in order to do so than relying on a level 3, which has a very flimsy activation condition to it. So yeah, I mean, it is very archetypal, and stuff, but vanishing one card from your opponent's graveyard ain't gonna do you much good, since it's a bit too slow to like disrupt plays for some of the stronger cards which use graveyard effects. Next up we have Gladiator Beast Murmilloor, and his summon effect is that you can target one face-up monster and destroy that target, and it has the standard Gladiator Beast tag-out effect, so I'll be elaborating those effects from now on like this for all the monsters that have it. And yeah, back in the day, this used to be a pretty solid form of monster removal. Basically a monster version of a certain other monster we'll get into later, which was on the limited list because of how good it was. But yeah, it was a pretty fun card to pull off, but nowadays it's not that good because it targets, so yeah, most of the good stuff you'd want to remove with this effect cannot be targeted, so yay. Anyway, next up we have Gladiator Beast SAMNITED, and his summon effect is when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can add one Gladiator Beast card from your deck to your hand, and has the tag out effect. I mean, it's a pretty okay searcher for the time. It has pretty decent attack values for level 3 monsters, and it has some we'll get to some back row support which could make this thing a bit more versatile and not so flimsy to run. But yeah, this card searches your entire archetype, so it does see some plays in today's builds, but it has to specifically destroy a monster by battle in order to apply it, not just inflict damage, which would be much more appreciated because, yeah, most of the monsters now have very good protection in order to prevent that from happening, or are too big for this thing to crush. So yeah, 1 or 2 of these are usually the ratios for this card. Next up we have another one of their newer support cards, the absolutely beautiful Gladiator Beast ATRIX. And her summon effect is that you can send one Gladiator Beast monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard except herself until the end phase. This card's level and name become the sent monsters, and it has the tag out effect. And basically this is a Foolish Burial and an extra Foolish Burial in one. Also can basically copy the names and the level of said monsters, which can be useful since some of their fusion monsters actually require specific monsters in order for a contact fusion. So yeah, I guess she works well. Also sets up the graveyard for future plays. So yeah, she's usually ran at 2 or 3. Next up we have Gladiator Beast DIMACARIE, and his summon effect is that it can attack twice during each battle phase, and it has the tag out effect. Yeah, but double attacking with 1600 attack is not that impressive, but still the effect isn't still it doesn't hurt to have this effect if you choose to run something like Moon Mirror Shield, which is a welcome option nowadays in Gladiator Beast decks, since this thing can pop 2 birds with 1 stone most of the time. So yeah, run by preference along with Moon Mirror Shield. Next up we have Gladiator Beast Darius. His summon effect is that you can target a Gladiator Beast in your graveyard in order to special summon it, but its effects are negated by this card and is shuffled into the deck when this card leaves the field, and it has the tag out effect. Yeah, this is actually usually a 3-off staple because it resummons some Gladiator Beasts from the graveyard, which you can then use for Link plays, Xyz plays, or Fusion plays, which the archetype is based around. You lose the monster as soon as this card even leaves the field, so you have to be careful in order to use the monster you summoned with this before using this thing as material for something. And basically, it's a very nice card, and you should run 3 of these. One of their monsters actually requires it as a material, so yeah. Next up we have a true legend. Gladiator Beast Bestiari is a level 4 with 1500 attack and 800 defense, and if it is special summoned by a Gladiator Beast, you can target a spell or trap on the field and destroy that target. And it has the tag out effect. This card was actually limited for quite some time during the early stages of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because his pop effect, along with a certain other fusion monster, which we'll get into later, made it a genuine threat in basically any matchup the Gladiator Beasts were present. Since the battle traps were heavily rampant back in those days, and floodgates weren't much to go by, and if there were, this guy would probably take care of them before the opponent could even think about activating them or stopping this in some sort of way. Bestiari is an absolute beast, and yeah, at least it was back in the day, because this kind of effect is a bit outdated now. Still, he doesn't hurt in the occasional Gladiator Beast build, since one of the best fusion monsters requires him as material. Next up we have Gladiator Beast LAQUARI. If this card is special summoned, yes, the usual summon effect, its original attack becomes 2100, and it has the tag out effect. Yeah, but the additional 300 attack is really not impressive nowadays, so I say don't bother with this one. Yeah, it used to be a pretty legit playmaker and main beatstick of the engine, of the main deck engine back in the day, but nowadays it's not worth it. Next up we have Gladiator Beast LANISTA. Its summon effect is that you can target a Gladiator Beast in your graveyard and banish it, and this card's name becomes the target's name until the end phase, and it has the tag out effect. This used to be fine back in the day, nothing too spectacular, but is entirely replaced by ATRIX in that regard, so don't bother. Next up we have Gladiator Beast EQUESTE. His summon effect is that you can target a Gladiator Beast card in your graveyard and add it to your hand, and it has the tag out effect. Recycling is also pretty nice for the time this thing came around. And basically, it's basically one-off if you really are desperate for some recycling, but as we'll see later on, these guys have some better back row pieces in order to take back your losses, so it kind of makes this guy obsolete. Next up we have Gladiator Beast TYGERIUS. This card cannot be used as a fusion material monster. When this card is special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster, you can discard one Gladiator Beast card to add one Gladiator Beast monster from your deck to your hand. Okay, the search effect is alright. It's a bit better in my opinion than Jesus, what was his name again? SAMNITED. But why the absolute hell can't this thing be used as a fusion material? The thing that this entire archetype is based on? He doesn't even have the tag out effect for some imbecilic reason. Don't bother with this one. Next up we have Gladiator Beast HOPLOMUS. Alright. Tongue wrapped there. And his summon effect is that its original defense becomes 2400, and it has the tag out effect. It's basically a defense version of LAQUARI, which makes it even worse, and don't run it. Next up we have Gladiator Beast SECUTOR. When it's summoned by a Gladiator Beast, the summon effect is that at the end of any battle phase in which this card attacked or was attacked, you can special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters from your deck, except Gladiator Beast SECUTOR. For some reason, this tiny piece of shit does not have the tag out effect like the rest of the archetype, but the swarming effect can actually be pretty strong, but it's so goddamn slow. If it was like the instantly you summon like 2 Gladiator Beasts and then you're locked into Gladiator Beast for the rest of this turn, then I have actually called it a very good card, and I would actually think of running it. But as it is now, it's really not worth it, and it's a questionable one-off. Alright, before we move on to the higher level Gladiator Beast, first up we have Gladiator Beast ANDALE, which is a normal monster with 1900 attack and basically 3-off staple if you choose to run a build involving Rescue Rabbit, and a monster known as GB Hunter, which only effect is that cards on the field cannot be returned to the deck. So yeah, lore-wise, this is actually supposed to be Gladiator Beast Hunter, which I did not know until very recently. I always thought that this was just that random monster from a Konami video game that was adapted most likely like Metal Gear Solid or something. And then it turns out it's actually Gladiator Beast anti-support / support, so yeah. Oh, and if you're interested, take a look at her character profile on Rule 34. It's really fun and very much worth your time. All right, enough about her. Let's go on to the high-level Gladiator Beast. First up, we have Noxious, a level 5 with 0 attack and 1000 defense. And when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, change the attack target to this card, and proceed the damage calculation. This card cannot be destroyed by that battle, and if it is special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster, you can send one Gladiator Beast monster from your deck to the graveyard, and it has a tag-out effect. Yeah, this is actually a pretty sweet attack stopper, and it can also trigger its own effect by summoning itself with its own effects. So yeah, it's a very interesting card, and also it can be destroyed by the battle in which it special summons itself. It can basically it can actually switch out himself with another Gladiator Beast, which you might be able to use as a better wall or a better beat stick in order to dodge the opponent's next attack. Well, yeah, it's a fun card to use, but I wouldn't advise maxing out on it because it's a level 5, so 2 should be perfectly fine. Next up, we have their final level 5, Gladiator Beast Spartacus. This card cannot be special summoned except by the effect of a Gladiator Beast HOPLOMUS. When this card is special summoned, add one Gladiator Beast equip spell card from your deck to your hand. At the end of the battle phase, it has the tag out effect. I find this one very weird. First of all, it can only be special summoned by the effect of a very specific Gladiator Beast, which is not even worth running. And all it does is search out Gladiator Beast equip spells, which, as I'll say later on, are mostly not worth running, so neither is this guy. Next up, we have Gladiator Beast Alexander, their first level 6, and their only level 6 at that. This card cannot be special summoned except by Gladiator Beast DIMACARIE. If this card was special summoned, it is unaffected by the effects of spell cards. At the end of the battle phase, if this card attacked or was attacked, it has the tag out effect. And I don't know, this one is another monster which can be special summoned by a very specific monster, and I am almost always allergic to that. But I actually have to commend it for having such a strong protection effect against spell cards, which is pretty admirable for the time this card came out. So yeah, it's a cool card in that regard, but overall it's not a very good card because, well, you need a specific monster. However, this one is worth running a bit more DIMACARIE, but not as much as to warrant running a copy or two of this. Next up, we have Gladiator Beast OCTAVIUS, their first level 7, and I think they're only level 7. No, it's not. 2500 attack, and when this card is special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast summon effect, target one face down spell or trap card in the spell and trap zone, destroy that target, and at the end of the battle phase, if this card attack or was attack, shuffle it into the deck or discard one card. I find this one very weird. First of all, how can this thing even exist when Bestiari is already a thing? And second of all, the tag out effect is halfway there. Like, you shuffle it into the deck, or, well, you can either put it on the field or you have to discard one card, or what's going on here? Like, it's limited to face down back row, which is absolutely imbecilical to me because most of the back row tends to be face up and activated. And second, why did they omit the tag out effect? Why did they have a freaking Gladiator Beast with a maintenance cost? Who designed this? What's going on here? Anyway, now next up we have their semi-final main deck monster, that being Gladiator Beast Vespasius. It's a level 7, 2300 attack, and at the start of the damage step, if your Gladiator Beast monster battles a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn, and if it's summoned by a Gladiator Beast summon effect, all monsters you control gain 500 attack, and it has the tag out effect. Oh, this is actually a very nice card to consider running because Gladiator Beasts tend to like partake in battle since they're gladiators and beasts. And this basically guarantees a free monster, level 7, so rank 7 plays are also there. Hard ones per turn, understandable, and not to mention it boosts all monsters attack by 500, so if you have an established extra deck board, then, well, you're in for a treat with this thing. Tag out effect as usual, so yeah, 3 out of 3 copies in your decks should work fine. And their final main deck monster is Gladiator Beast Augustus. It's level 8 this time around, and when this card is special summoned, has the summon effect, you can special summon one Gladiator Beast monster from your hand in defense position and shuffle it into the deck during the end phase. And it has the tag out effect. Yeah, if it was a bit... yeah, you can summon this pretty easily. It's a decent trade-in target as well. It's basically a level 8 play extender, which is a bit unusual to see, but overall it works quite well. So yeah, 2 or 3 of these are usually fine. Alright, now on to the main meat and potatoes. We have the Gladiator Beast fusion monsters. First up we have Gladiator Beast SAGITTARI, which is a level 5 with 2500 attack, which is beyond amazing. Requires 2 Gladiator Beasts, and its only effect is that you can be summoned with Contact Fusion, which is the way how all Gladiator Beasts are summoned, by shuffling the material monsters into the deck. Has no additional effects, so this is not worth running or talking about. However, what actually does matter in this discussion is their first level 6 Gladiator Beast Gyzarus. Requires a Bestiari specifically on any Gladiator Beast, 2400 attack, and must first be special summoned from the extra deck by shuffling the above cards you control into the deck. You do not use polymerization, basically Contact Fusion, and when it is special summoned you can target up to 2 cards on the field, destroy those targets. And at the end of the battle phase, if this card battle, you can return it to the extra deck, special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters from your deck, except Gladiator Beast Bestiari. Okay, so this was basically a very, very popular and a very, very powerful card at the time, since his destruction effect was such a great form of removal, and basically nothing could top it, and nothing could, basically, unless you had like some very specific negation tools at your disposal. As soon as this guy hits the field, you basically destroy 2 cards, and if you summon Bestiari beforehand, you get a 1 back row destruction as well. And it's pretty damn logical why it restricts you from summoning Bestiari when you defuse it, is because if you would summon Bestiari, you'd get 4 cards destroyed per turn for your opponent, which is a pretty damn admirable power output for an archetype that came around 2007 or 6, I believe. So yeah, pretty damn good card. However, a bit outdated nowadays. Its glory days have long gone, but still it can find the you can make the best out of it in the new Gladiator Beast support decks. So yeah, it's definitely a card full of stories to tell, and definitely worth running with 1 or 2 copies in your extra deck. Next up we have Gladiator Beast Gyodias. This is a level 7, requires Gladiator Beast Spartacus and a Gladiator Beast monster, and this card can only be special summoned with a Contact Fusion, and when this card destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the defense of the destroyed monster. And it has Defusion effect, and it locks you out from summoning Spartacus. Very, very unreliable and not worth running, because it burns for the amounts of defense points the monster has, which most monsters nowadays don't have defense points, so it's irrelevant, and much like its main deck monster, it's not worth running. Next up we have Gladiator Beast HERAKLINOS. This is another level 8, requires LAQUARI and 2 Gladiator Beasts, and must be summoned with Contact Fusion, and during either player's turn when a spell or trap is activated, you can discard 1 card to negate the activation and destroy it, and this card must be face up on the field to resolve this effect. And yeah, this was actually a pretty good boss monster for the time, because it had a non-once per turn back row negation effect at the price of discarding cards, which were plentiful back in that day's meta. And it doesn't have the tag out effect for some reason, but I can live with that, because the the other effects are actually very good. This is basically why you actually run LAQUARI this is basically the only reason why you would ever want to run LAQUARI in a Gladiator Beast deck. Next up we have Gladiator Beast and ANDALE. This is another level 8. Requires Gladiator Beast Augustus and 2 Gladiator Beasts. Has 1000 attack and 28 defense. And must first be special summoned from your extra deck by shuffling the above cards you control into the deck. And yeah, Contact Fusions, classic. If summoned this way, you can special summon one level 7 or lower Gladiator Beast fusion monster from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. And at the end of the battle phase of this card battle, you can return it to the extra deck to special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters from your deck. And this one does not restrict you from summoning Augustus. So yeah, this is actually a very one of the more recent support cards from Arc 5, and it actually works pretty well. It basically you're basically guaranteed a fusion monster again if you have link arrows to spare as soon as you summon this. You're most likely going to be summoning something like GLADIATOR'S or well, the GLADIATOR'S is the only relevant choice here since the Gaiodias is not worth running and neither is SAGITTARI, so yeah, I wish you could actually summon HERAKLINOS with this 7 things effect, but that would be a bit too much, wouldn't it? So yeah, run 2 or 3 of these. Next up we have Gladiator Beast NEROKIUS, another level 8, which requires 3 Gladiator Beasts. You must be summoned by Contact Fusion and cannot be destroyed by battle. If this card attacks or is attacked, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step, and has the tag out effect. I guess it works. I would have liked if it did anything else. It's special summons only 2 Gladiator Beasts, which is kind of weird since it requires 3 Gladiator Beast monsters, but yeah, it's pretty harmless, but watch out for the ratios. I believe 1 should be perfectly fine if you're going in for the overkill. Next up we have Gladiator Beast TAMER Editor, another level 8, requires 2 level 5 or higher Gladiator Beast monsters, and must first be special summoned from your extra deck by shuffling the above. Yeah, Contact Fusion cannot be used as fusion material. Once per turn you can special summon 1 Gladiator Beast fusion monster from your extra deck except the Editor, ignoring its summoning condition, and at the end of the battle phase, tag out into 1 Gladiator Beast monster. Okay, so this one's actually a better version of ANDALE if you crave additional field presence, since this one can summon HERAKLINOS, which is a good card, and basically makes LAQUARI redundant in dedicated builds. It's a bit of a bummer that this one floats into only 1 Gladiator Beast though, but you're most likely going to be using this thing as a link material as well, since it cannot be used as a fusion material for some reason. But yeah. And the last fusion monster is Gladiator Beast Domitianus, sorry. And this one is the level 10, which requires Gladiator Beast Vespasius as material and 2 other Gladiator Beasts. Must be special summoned by Contact Fusion, and once per turn when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. You choose the attack targets for your opponent's attacks, and at the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can return it to the extra deck and special summon a 1 Gladiator Beast from your deck. Also, for some reason, this card has a tag out for only 1 monster. Don't know why, but it's basically now a monster effect version of HERAKLINOS, which is very nice. It's a hard once per turn, because of course it's hard once per turn, and no, it's actually a soft once per turn, so yeah, it's a bit better then. And it's as a thundering cherry on top, you can actually choose your opponent's attack target, which is beyond hilarious in my opinion. So yeah, definitely worth running, as well as Vespasius, which is one of its fusion materials. And their first link monster is Gladiator Beast Dragosis. This is a link 2 that points bottom left and bottom right. 2000 attack requires 2 Gladiator Beast monsters, and if a Gladiator Beast monster you control attacks, it cannot be destroyed by that battle. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. At the end of the battle phase, if this card unbattled, you can return it to the extra deck to special summon 2 Gladiator Beast monsters with different names from your deck, and you can only use this effect once per turn. Not exactly great, it's more on the verge of mediocre. Okay, if you choose to return this thing into the extra deck, you get the exact same materials you used to summon it, which is a plus. Basically gives Gladiator Beasts protection from battle. Armada is shut down, which is fine, but it's prone to basically any form of removal, and yeah, it's basically the first thing the opponent will try to get rid of before going into the battle phase. So yeah, it's all right as a 1 or 2 off. So yeah, and our final monster is Test Panther. This one requires 2 low monsters, including a Gladiator Beast, has 800 attack, another link 2 points down and bottom left. And if this card is link summoned, you can add 1 Gladiator Beast card from your deck to your hand. You can target 1 Gladiator Beast monster you control, shuffle that Gladiator Beast monster into the deck, and if you do, special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your deck with a different original name, and treat it as it was special summoned by the effect of a Gladiator Beast monster, and you can only use this effect once per turn. Okay, a bit better in my opinion than Gladiator Beast Dragossus, because this one more focuses on extending your plays in the Link format, which is kind of how the game works nowadays. So you can also link it away into some bigger Link monsters when you get the chance, so it will be a much useful card in that regard once you start setting up your plays properly. So yeah, it's a good card. And next up we have their first field spell, well, their only field spell, their first spell card, Colosseum Cage of the Gladiator Beasts. Place 1 counter on this card each time a monster is special summoned from either player's deck. All Gladiator Beast monsters gain 100 attack and defense for each of those counters on this card, and if this card would be destroyed by a card effect, you can discard 1 Colosseum Cage of Gladiator Beast to prevent this card from being destroyed. Oh boy, we have a I don't know what to say. A minuscule attack point boost, which fuels itself by having counters on the field, which are not even named. They're not even called GB counters or anything. Yeah, you're going to be rack up a ton of them, but this field spell can be disposed of in any basically conceivable way, since nobody in their right mind is going to be discarding copies of this thing in order to keep this on the field. But if this card made any sense, it would be like Kyoto Waterfront, where it removes a counter in order to keep itself on the field. And I think Kyoto Waterfront is actually locked into a hard once per turn with that effect, but I'm not sure, don't hold me to that. But yeah, there are much better field spells that offer way more utility for your Glad Beasts, and they're not even they don't belong to the archetype, so no, don't run it. Next up we have Gladiator Beast's Respite. Shuffle 2 Gladiator Beast cards from your hand into the deck and then draw 3 cards. I am not going to explain this further, just run 3 of these. Gladiator Beast Proving Ground. Gladiator Proving Ground is another spell card which allows you to add 1 level 4 or lower Gladiator Beast monster from your deck to your hand, which is also a 3 off with no need for explanation. Goodbye. Next up we have Gladiator's Return, which allows you to target 3 Gladiator Beast cards in your graveyard and shuffle all 3 into the deck, then draw 1 card. A weak version with Pot of Avarice, which was also banned ages when this card came out, so yeah. It works in the recycling format. Jar of Avarice can be a bit of a better card, but however that is slower due to being a trap, so yeah, it's worth running. Next up we have the Quick Play Gladiator Taming. If a face-up Gladiator Beast monster is on the field, you can activate one of these effects. Either select 1 face-up monster your opponent controls and change its battle position, and select 1 face-up Gladiator Beast monster your opponent controls and take control of it until the end phase. I am puzzled by this thing's existence. The only explanation for the second effect to even exist is because they have a certain trap card, which is horrible by the way, which gives control of Gladiator Beasts to your opponent. I know it's beyond conceivable for me. And not to mention that this second effect is applied until the end phase. Yeah, sure, you can use the Gladiator Beast to send it back to the ground into the deck in order to summon a new one, but still, it's gimmicky. And not to mention the first effect is outclassed by absolutely everything ever, including like the legendary enemy controller, which nobody even runs anymore. So yeah, not to mention that the link monsters are also a thing, so the first effect is completely pointless nowadays. Okay, now we've got to the equip cards. First up we have Gladiator Beast's Battle Archfiend Shield. You can only equip it to a Gladiator Beast, and if the equipped monster would be destroyed, destroy this card instead. And when this card is sent to the graveyard because it was equipped to a monster you control that was shuffled into your deck, return this card to your hand. Yeah, very flimsy and outdated type of protection effect, and basically it's not worth running. And as a side note, all of the equipped spells have this floating effect if the Gladiator Beast they're equipped to is returned to the deck. Basically, they wanted to make them very powerful as self-recursion engines, which might have worked around 2006 or 7, but it sure as hell doesn't work nowadays. It ain't the Guardian, it ain't Butterfly Dagger Elma, so yeah. Their next equip is Gladiator Beast's Battle Gladius. Equip only to a Gladiator Beast monster. It gains 300 attack, and when the equipped monster is removed from the field by its own effect, the recursion effect. Well, if you really need that Butterfly Dagger Elma effect for your ever so fearsome Royal Magical Library, feel free to experiment with this thing's effect if you can actually pull it off more than like twice or 3 times, then yeah, feel free. Anyway, this thing is such a piece of garbage, don't run it. Next up we have their other equipped card, Gladiator Beast's Battle Halberd. Equip only to a Gladiator Beast, and when it attacks you can destroy one spell or a trap at the end of the damage step. And recovery effect. And no, just run Bestiari. You're best off to just run Bestiari instead. Next up we have the final equip, Gladiator Beast's Battle Manica. Equip only to a Gladiator Beast monster, and it cannot be destroyed by battle, and damage calculation is applied normally. And the recovery effect. Outdated, slow, don't run it. The equips are not really worth running. And next up we have the quick play Indomitable Gladiator Beast. Target of a face-up Gladiator Beast monster you control gains 500 attack until the end phase. While this card is in your graveyard, you can return 2 Gladiator Beasts from your graveyard to the deck to return this card to your hand. Yeah, another very pointless battle boost effect. Yeah, it has a recovery effect, which also helps the Archetype. But yeah, no, it's not worth running, in my opinion. Next up we have Gladiator Beast Comeback. Special summon 1 Gladiator Beast monster from your hand or graveyard with a different type than the monsters you control, and if you do, it cannot be destroyed by battle. Yeah, simple, easy monster reborn, or basically a hand summon effect, and it's basically ran at 3. It's one of their newer support cards, and it really shows. Next up we have United Gladiator Beasts, another quick play. During the battle phase, shuffle into the deck from your hand, field, or graveyard the fusion materials that are listed on a Gladiator Beast fusion monster, and if you do, special summon that fusion monster from your extra ignoring its summoning conditions, and you can only use this once per turn, and you cannot declare attacks the turn you activate this card except with Gladiator Beast monster. Well, just like Neos received a fusion spell in one of their recent support waves, now Gladiator Beasts also received one. But unlike Neos, Gladiator Beast never had a problem with its unique contact fusion mechanics, so there was not really much a need for this, but you can actually surprise the opponent when you activate this in order to recycle some of your graveyard stuff back into the deck and then summon a pretty high beat stick in order to deliver the final nail into the opponent's coffin, so I guess running 1 or 2 of these couldn't hurt. Next up we have the final Gladiator Beast spell card, that being Gladiator Beast Rejection. A continuous spell that says that your opponent cannot target a Gladiator Beast monsters you control with card effects except during the battle phase. If a Gladiator Beast monster is special summoned from your deck, you can special summon in defense position one Gladiator Beast monster from your deck with a different type than the monsters you control, and you can only use this once per turn. Yeah, basically protection that only stops in the battle phase, basically turns all the Gladiator Beasts into Leo's Guardians of the Sacred Tree, except this one is shut down during the battle phase, which isn't that big of a deal, since you're basically activating all these powerful negation and stun effects during the battle phase with your Gladiator Beasts, since they're all about the battle phase. So it won't be that much of a hassle. Also, the summon from the deck is also really cute and can help you edge you closer to a victory. So I guess one or two of these is also fine. Their next card is another trap. Is their first trap card. Sorry, Gladiator Beast NAUMACHIA. Alright, well, a weird name there. Continuous trap, and while you control a Gladiator Beast monster, your opponent's monster must attack if able. Once per turn, you can shuffle one Gladiator Beast monster from your hand or graveyard into the deck, then target one Gladiator Beast monster you control. It gains attack equal to its original defense until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. If this card in the spell and trap zone is destroyed by a card effect, you can activate this effect. This turn, your Gladiator Beast monsters cannot be destroyed by battle. Yeah, one of their newer support cards, and it really shows. Offers some nice recursion and basically some nice protection effects to your Gladiator Beasts. Basically turns them into very high beat sticks. What's not to love? Also, it's a continuous effect, so you're not going into a hard minus by running multiples, and you're not clogging up your deck's consistency in order to run multiples. So yeah, one or two should be perfectly fine. Next up we have Mad Gladiator Beasts. Target face-up cards on the field up to the number of Gladiator Beast monsters you control with different names and destroy them. Yeah, this is a pretty bombastic comeback, and basically a finishing tool, as in you can actually clear the field of your opponent's cards in order to go for the overkill. If you manage to, you're most likely going to be destroying up to 3 to 4 cards averagely with this card's effect when you make all the preparations and setup for it. So yeah, not worth maxing out on, because it can be a bit cloggy, and you might not always have the results you were seeking with when you don't perform the appropriate setup for this card to go off. So yeah, one or two of these is usually fine. Next up we have Defensive Tactics, one of their older cards. If you control a face-up Gladiator Beast monster, for the rest of this turn, monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle, and any battle damage you take is reduced to 0. After this card resolves, put it on the bottom of your deck. Well, now, a self-recurring trap card that places itself on the bottom of the deck when it's used. I guess there are worse things to consider, but yeah, this card is basically not needed now, since much of the newer support cards do the same thing but better. So yeah. Next up we have a counter trap Disarm. Return one Gladiator Beast monster from your hand to the deck, then negate the activation of an effect of a spell card and destroy it. Yeah, an archetypal negation of a spell card, which was actually pretty damn relevant for the time, and was definitely worth putting in your deck. Also, it shuffles the monster from the hand into the deck, which might replace, put it back into the deck in order to summon it with a different Gladiator Beast in order to trigger its effect. So yeah. Just a heads up, they have counter traps specifically for monsters and trap effects as well, because this archetype, like I said, is a very old archetype, and just basically a one card which could negate a monster spell or trap, just like Solemn Warning, was a bit too much at the time, so they made them separate, all with their unique costs to them. Double Tag Team is their next card, and you can only activate it only when you special summon a Gladiator Beast monster, and you can special summon an additional level 4 or lower Gladiator Beast monster from your deck. Fine effort, but not necessary, because all the other stuff we've seen up to now can do the job way faster and way better than this thing. So if you run this, it's probably at not more than 1. Next up we have Gladiator Beast War Chariot, which when an effect monster's effect is activated, if you control a face-up Gladiator Beast monster, you can negate the activation and destroy it. It's basically a bit better than Disarm due to the fact that it does not require you to do anything except like control a Gladiator Beast. And it's basically the best counter trap due to the fact that the monster effects are much more rampant and frequent in today's game nowadays. And next up we have a Gladiator Beast Lash, which you can only activate when you special summon a Gladiator Beast monster and your opponent discards one card from their choice. Letting your opponent freely do their graveyard setup by triggering it via summoning your Gladiator Beasts. Not recommended, really. Garbage, I tell you. Goodbye. Next up we have Parry, the final counter trap, and this one allows you to has the exact same cost as Disarm, only it works on trap cards. So yeah, this one's a bit worse due to the fact that most trap cards are ran in the trap cards first of all are ran very sparsely, and the ones that are ran are usually some floodgates or continuous stun cards. So this thing has effect couldn't go off properly most of the time due to the fact that there's not much stuff left to negate. So yeah. And oh boy, we're at the final 57th card. Yeah, I thought the Archetype had way more cards than that. We have the Trojan Gladiator Beast. Special summon one Gladiator Beast monster from your hand to your opponent's side of the field, then draw one card. Yeah, if you thought TORAXER was bad, then we have this shit. Masterpiece of design, I tell you. Just don't run it. Okay, time to raise these Gladiator Beasts. In terms of consistency, for back in the day, it was actually pretty impressive and admirable the way when they were able to swarm the field with multiple monsters upon dealing some massive battle damage and making some serious plays. They can swarm into even more hordes of monsters, which could proceed to squash the opponent even harder. But nowadays, it's fine. It's nothing too special. Basically 3 Tinky is the way to go with all beasts and beast warriors nowadays, and Gladiator Beasts are no exception, and their own consistency was slightly improved with the new support. So yeah, I'll be generous and give them a 2 out of 3 in that regard. Power gets a 2 out of 3. While there is a certain amount of beat sticks which are very high attack based monsters, which have all different different stun effects and basically different destruction effects, which can caught the opponent off guard in order to pummel them into the ground even harder. Most of their monsters don't have really impressive attack values first early on and then later in the Archetype's lifespan, because the Archetype was mostly built around on the summon effects and the continuous effects of their better monsters in order to make the best use out of them, in order to leave the opponent helpless at the mercy of the many monsters' huge attack values, which you bumped up with some other stuff or did something. Power output usually depends on their highest monster is actually the Dominatius, which is a frequently ran card, but all other monsters usually which are worth running in the extra deck, usually don't exceed 2500 attack most often, and it's kind of sad for that matter. So yeah, 2 out of 3, which leans slightly towards a 3 out of 3, but I'm still gonna keep it about 2 out of 3. In terms of comeback ability, it's basically a very aggressive battle focused deck, and back in the day hardly anything could stun it or get rid of it, so the comeback ability wasn't mainly an issue back in the day. But nowadays you need proper ways to come back from a harsh beatdown, which some decks might be having trouble with in today's meta, which Gladiator Beasts are certainly a part of. New support has only just recently arrived. People still don't have enough exposure and experience to them in order to think of what great comeback abilities might also be there. There aren't many that help out beasts and beast warriors, so yeah, 1 out of 3 in my opinion. Protection does exist. They have some formidable boss monsters with outstanding protection effect like HERAKLINOS and DOMITIANUS, which HERAKLINOS isn't even limited to a once per turn. It's basically Naturia Exterior with a slight cost, and HERAKLINOS is basically a quasar only for a monster effect. So there is some of it, but most of but sometimes you just won't have the monster available at that specific moment in order for it to count. So yeah, I'm gonna give him a 1 out of 3 in that regard. And as for the versatility, I have to give him a 2 out of 3 just for the legacy these guys just left behind, because this was one of the best decks ever made in today's game. Today they're not really that meta rampant. We'll just see if they receive some new support and if they top some events in today's link focused meta. I'm not sure how their lifespan will continue, but yeah, they're not splashable with that much things, and many things which are splashable with them are usually very, very specific and very carefully picked. So yeah, this was basically one of the more popular decks, and the legacy left behind is certainly felt. And if they were to make some other support for this archetype, yeah, I'd like to see the direction this archetype definitely takes place. We'll see if we actually get some new Gladiator Beast support in form of in the new Eternity Code booster that's coming off. And hell, maybe expand the story with GB Hunter. Yeah, it's certainly spicy to see, if you know what I mean. Anyway, yeah, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, vlogs, and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. And as usual, I'll upload the next vid whenever I can. See you all, have a good day, and peace.